Hey, all right. So I know everyone's gonna jump on soon, and it's kind of late because this wasn't really a planned live. But I felt like I need to obviously have another conversation. So I prefer to have less of these conversations, but I also feel like our community, the way we are, this is like a constant learning experience for everyone. So I feel like it's necessary that I have this conversation, especially about myself. So obviously, I haven't really been on social media or like the way that I normally am for a lot of different reasons. I obviously made a public statement about it, and this is something that I need to talk about. Before I get into specifically the public statement and why I made it, I want to give you some background information that I don't think a lot of people know. So, I am an introvert, and on the spectrum of introversion, I am like an extreme extrovert. I mean, introvert on in the introversion scale. So, what's the difference between extroversion and introversion is like the first piece that I feel like I have to lay down. Someone who's an introvert likes independence over togetherness, right? So, like nature, solitude, being by yourself over big groups of people, being the center of attention, being in the middle of a party. Someone who's introverted likes maybe to read books, likes a calm atmosphere, maybe would pick a lounge over a nightclub to hang out. So when it comes to introversion, I'm an introvert all the way. I personally do not like being in large groups of people, right? Like going to a concert, I wouldn't, I've done it, but I don't really like it. I got social anxiety. Or like being, I'll go out dancing and I might have fun, but like if people are getting too close to me, I start getting anxiety. So when it comes to being around a lot of stimulus, or if I have to do public speaking, if I have to give a speech, if I'm doing stuff on social media, like no matter what it is, when I have to connect with other people, it like fries my brain. It makes me really tired. And what ends up happening sometimes is like it's not healthy for me. And I have been like this for a very, very, very long time. Like I've been like this my whole life. Like I've been a bookworm who's like kept to herself. The thing about like leadership is when you go into leadership roles or you take a leadership initiative, you obviously have to be out in the public and you have to have conversations. So while I can have a conversation, while I can be in the public, while I can engage with people and like be like a normal extrovert, it taxes me, meaning it tires me out and it builds my anxiety levels, which triggers my symptoms of PTSD. So, in the beginning of the movement, I obviously had to be in the public eye, right? Like, that was for the movement to keep going and keep it, just doing everything. So, in order to do that, like, whether or not I was feeling good or not, I like just had to keep the movement operating all the time. And even when really bad things were happening, it was like, do I give up on this or do I keep going? And being an introvert, having a calm, safe, peaceful life is what I like. That's what I'm attracted to. That's what I enjoy. Then when it comes to doing advocacy, it's like, and even the movement, no matter how many times I would just like avoid ever starting the movement and ever doing it and, just like doing my own thing in life, it was like I always got pulled back, right? Like this force was always like, life is like, you're going to come this way. Like, oh, you're doing great in finance, your career's going well. Oh, you're going to go miscarriage. You're going to get really severe symptoms of PTSD. You're going to go through flashbacks. And then, oh, on top of it, you're going to tell your story because someone's going to publish it in the paper. That's not true. You're going to come out and tell your story. And then when you come out and tell your story, you're going to get attacked by everyone. So being introverted, those are not experiences I like. Also, being an introvert, I I'm a more into my thoughts and my feelings than I am other people's opinions of me. So someone who's an extrovert would incline to make people happy or like charismatic, like Bill Clinton, right? Like someone who is so charismatic, that they can control an audience to get people to fall in love with them because that's what they care about, right? Where like I'm guided by this internal compass, and like that's where my emotional fortitude stands all the time. So when a trial in adversity happens, I go back to this internal moral compass versus outward public perception like an extrovert would, because an extrovert gets energized and connected by the people in the audience, where like an introvert gets connected by like the internal self. So what happens with that is like when you have PTSD, especially like with isolation and being an introvert, I'm more prone to isolation, right? The thing about it is like I personally like rarely feel loneliness. I don't like an extrovert would need to like go out and constantly feel like they're connecting with people and entertaining people. Where like I could personally go days without talking to people and I would feel fine. Right? Like there's points that I feel like I could go without talking to like people I really care about for months. And like I love them and I care about them, and very short conversation still feels good to me. Where I'm like, hey, you and I made a connection, peace and love in the world, we're good, right? And I can be like that with my own family. So it's introversion is part of my personality template, and it's also I think part of it is also having PTSD has kind of pushed me more to the introversion spectrum, that I have to be careful that I'm not isolating. Right. But like the thing for me is like I could go into isolation and I could chill and I would be happy. Like I would be a happy person, and I'll just be like feeling up my chakras, like, and meditating, and I'll be good and I'll be fine. And I'm happy like that. So what happens with PTSD that I think most of the time for people as a whole is that you're used to seeing most people have extroversion with PTSD, where like people who have PTSD, you're used to seeing them like want to be in the center of attention, their fight or flight heights up, and they like really enjoy that. Where for me, like it's really not a positive reaction. Like I have to like deep breathe and like pretend that I'm comfortable in group settings. Like when big groups of people like or like groups of people, I'll talk and I'll engage. But like I prefer like one-on-one conversation, or maybe like a small group, right? Like maybe 3 or 4 people. So that's my personality template. So then when I'm constantly in the public eye and I'm doing stuff, whether it's news and media, whether it's giving a speech, whether it's on social media, no matter what it is, there are points that it does not feel good to me. I don't like it. And um it's not even the feedback, right? Like there's times that we get really, really great feedback. There's times that we get bad feedback. There's times we get neutral feedback. Like generally there's always feedback. But like it's not even the feedback itself. It's just that it's overstimulating. Like sometimes having to talk to people all the time drains me. So I need a break. However, I haven't been able to get that break, right? Like the last couple years that I've been doing this, I have not had like time to myself, let alone like just time away. And also like the obstacles that I have dealt with in the last couple years are also obstacles that I did not anticipate. Like you can't anticipate what obstacles you're gonna have. They just happen. So also like getting into advocacy and movement politics, like yeah, like you watch stuff about like movement leaders and you see their stories, right? Like especially a lot of what we see in the 1960s, but like we don't really see a lot about what happens to movement leaders in modern day. We see like increments, but we don't really see their stories play out. So a lot of times too, it's like I'm dealing with obstacles that it's like I can see a relationship historically, but also with technology, there are certain things that I like am learning. And one of those things is like that has stressed me out is like I have dealt with a couple of assassination attempts. And when I look at things historically, like I've seen Martin Luther King got stabbed before he got assassinated. Like same thing happened with Malcolm X. Diane Nash went through a couple of assassination attempts. I'm like, yeah, I think I got into movement politics and I was like, oh, um, like, yes, this possibility might exist, but at the same time, did I feel like in 2020 it was real, right? And then like I get involved in advocacy and like the social media stuff that happens is just like it's way too much at 90% of the time. But also like people don't realize how people do organize on social media to harm people. And that's where I made the public statement of like, I've been doxxed, I've been severely harassed, I've had assassination attempts, like I've had to get my former job involved. This shit is in court filings that this happened. Like these things are real and they happen. And it's like, obviously, me being somebody who's introverted and then I'm dealing with these types of risks in the public eye, it doesn't feel normal to me and it doesn't feel good. And I don't think it would feel normal to anyone, but perhaps somebody who's extroverted, they might tolerate these things better than what I do, right? Like, yes, it comes with the territory, but like the thing is, I care more about the mission. Like, there are many, many, many things that have happened, like even recently with press conferences and things like that. And like many people have taken credit for various things that like I've done myself, for things that I have funded, for projects that I funded. The first trip to DC, I funded that trip completely. The second trip to DC that we just did, I funded that trip completely. So the money that came for both of those DC trips came from me. But yeah, other people want to say like they own property or they own whatever it is, right? And like that's happened on various trips to DC where people want to take credit for things, right? And here's the thing, like honestly, it's frustrating to me, but at the same time, like I just want to get the mission accomplished, right? Like I just want to end military sexual trauma. I want it to stop. I don't want it to happen to anyone else. I think it's fucked up. And like people who are extroverted are more like, I want to be the center of attention. This has to happen. I'm like, throw the attention here, say what you want to say, as long as it brings awareness to the cause. But when it gets to my personal life and people are constantly wanting to know everything about my personal life, it gets fucking frustrating. Like, and the point that people go to is abusive, but it's stalking me. Like, you shouldn't be following me around anywhere. You shouldn't be also the way you're following me on social media to the point that you're following me in person. Or the fact that you're planning a fucking assassination like you think it's a joke on social media and it's not. Especially when you're planning an in-person action and like you're in a group messenger doing this. Like these things are not okay. They're not normal. They're not healthy. So obviously, if I'm the recipient of this and I'm finding this information out, it's going to affect my well-being. And like it gets frustrating. So like just like any other person, I need a break from this, right? And like I need to get myself together. There are points that I have to take care of my own mental well-being and like I have to take care of myself. So being someone who's introverted, who prefers actually being out of the spotlight and puts myself in the spotlight is already out of my comfort zone. I do it for the cause. I don't do this for myself. So it's like that in and of itself is me coming out of my comfort zone to do my part to end military sexual trauma, right? In the best ways that I can. And it's like at the same time to deal with everything that I have to deal with, it gets frustrating. Like it gets really frustrating. And like what also upsets me is that like there's this evolution where, it's like a lot of it was coming from white males in the Marine Corps to now a lot of it is like female veterans. And it's like, why are you harassing me? Why are you stalking me? Why are you following me? Why are you planning hits on me? Like, there has to be a point in your brain that that's not okay and that's not normal. So it gets to a point for me that it's like, I need to take a step back, reclaim my privacy, and to a point that I feel comfortable. And I obviously cannot be sharing to the extent that I am sharing on social media. And I can't be engaging at the same way that I was, because there's like this really odd obsession with my personal life. And I don't know why people are like this. I don't think that it's morally correct. I don't agree with it, but it is what it is. So for me personally, it's like I need to get my sanity in a place that I feel good. And that for me is managing my PTSD, making sure that I'm okay and I'm good. And now I have to limit my connection with the public because of how people are, right? In every facet, from not only, these attacks, but what triggers these attacks, right? And it's people making up stories that are not true. It's creating defamatory stories to post online of hearsay, and this shit is escalating. And then people are not thinking about how they take an action, and someone who's not healthy goes and takes a real life action that can harm someone's life. And it's like people who are doing these things don't necessarily think that far. And it's fucking sick and twisted, but that's the reality that I am living. So because of that, I have to make decisions to take care of myself, right? And take care of my family and my well being. And, when going through these circumstances, it does not feel good to me. It does not feel normal to me. I don't like it. I am now in a position that I have to deal with this. And I have never backed off or backed away from dealing with an obstacle, but it's like the level of security measures that I have to take to live my life, the level of what I've had to do, the level of law enforcement that I've had to get involved in things that I have to do, having to get security guards involved, having to get employers involved, like the level of things I've had to do for personal safety is well beyond what any normal human being could ever understand for their life. That's how unnormal it is. And for me, it's like, I don't want to be living my entire life like this. I want a normal life, right? Just like everyone else. Yes, I want to do advocacy, but at the same time, like some of the shit that people do is fucking sick. Like that's the best way I can put it. It's fucking sick and twisted. And when it comes to personal safety, that's another thing that I have to consider. I have PTSD, right? My fight or flight response is something I have to consider. My safety is something I have to consider. And I'm introverted. So it's like with all of these factors at play, I have to make decisions that I feel are good for myself. So now that we have volunteers who are more developed and that are really strong at what they do, everyone is pretty much helping support the movement in the way that they can to the best of their ability. So I can take care of myself, because right now that's what my focus is for my mental and emotional well-being. That's the point that I'm at, where I feel like I need to take that time for myself, and like I need that level of like introversion and privacy back. So I wanted to have this conversation because I'm sure everyone um is wondering why I'm like whoop, and just kind of disappeared. But it was really like I was at a point of exhaustion of just being in the public eye. Like literally just tired of it. Like I just didn't want to do it anymore. Like I was just like, fuck it, fuck it. Like I want to break. And I know that that has to do with my PTSD and the fact that I'm introverted. I know that it's both. And honestly, like I've pushed myself so many times to stay in when I wasn't feeling good. But like now I'm like, I just don't feel good and I want to just not feel good. Like I want to just go through my emotions and take care of myself and process my emotions out without having to be, in front of everyone doing that. I pretty much communicated what I wanted to, but I'm going to read, hold on, some comments. It's draining too. Yeah, it's super draining, like 24/7 draining. And it's not like, don't get me wrong, like, yes, it is draining, but like when I think about it draining and I think about a mission at hand, like I see societal changes happening, right? Like I see conversations regarding military sexual trauma. I see legislation regarding military sexual trauma. I see initiatives at the VA. Like, granted, it's a rocky, turbulent road, but there's conversations that are happening now that were not happening before in every aspect. Like even an article just came out on military.com about how talking about sex is taboo. And like, did we influence that? Like we did this like a month ago, and we talked about all of the things that are taboo with sex and sexual violence. So I see how our conversations are shifting culture. And I see how, when we're sharing content, how far it's spreading and how it's creating an impact and an influence in the military community. And I think it's great and I'm happy about it. And, don't get me wrong, like it's wonderful to see the progress, and the progress is rewarding. So it makes those points of fatigue worth it. And I'm happy to be a part of that journey. It's just also like, it's, like there are points that I just like want to be normal, and I want to just be a normal person and like not have to deal with certain things that I'm dealing with. So it has both sides to it. Thank you for all you do. You are amazing. That is really sweet, and I really appreciate hearing that. And I just want to let you know, like, thank you for saying that, because I needed to hear that. So I do appreciate you saying that. It's not okay what's happening to you. I agree with you that it's not normal, and I agree that this shouldn't be happening. These things have happened historically, and they've happened politically. So it's like I agree that these things shouldn't happen, but they do happen. And the choice I have is to control my actions, because I can't control other people, right? So I can't hope that people are gonna I think people are inherently good, but I think that people are also damaged and hurt, and not everyone is at the same mental capacity. So I can't rely on other people for my safety 24/7, right? Like I have to take actions that feel good to me. Some people have a way too much time. Well, some people have way too much time on their hands. There are a lot of creeps in the world. The internet just makes it easier to see them, for them, and for them to get around. Yeah, but the thing is, I think people see things online and automatically believe it's fact, especially if it comes from somebody that's like a friend of theirs. So I think a lot of times that's how propaganda or fake news starts spreading exponentially on social media. And that's another thing where it's like, I don't mind attention, and you can't pick between good and bad. Like, attention's attention. However, it's like when people are making my personal life the focal point and the extent that people are going to, that is not okay. Right. And it's like the focus is the movement, the mission is the movement, it's ending military sexual trauma, it's shifting culture. Like, that's what the focus needs to stay. The focus doesn't need to be on Janelle Marina Mendez, right? Like, I'm my own person. I want my personal life. Doing the movement and engaging with everyone is one thing. And I do share different aspects of myself: introversion, hypersexuality, what has happened after sexual trauma, like dating with PTSD due to MST, like relationship struggles, flashbacks. Like, I've talked in depth about my storyline relating to MST and PTSD. But when it comes to just like the day-to-day things going on in my life, like sometimes there's just too much interest in it, or like people contorting things or turning stories about my character into things that they're not, and like for their self-image, for their self-preservation, to contort things. Like, there are a lot of different things that people do that I just don't agree with in general, right? And I don't think everybody has their own moral compass and template, and that's just like the way it is. I appreciate that too. Like, that's nice to hear. As it as it pertains to MST. Well, yeah, the thing I feel like though with people in the MST community is like there is a spectrum, right? So there's people that have completely diminished capacities and completely diminished rationale that just base everything on their fight or flight. So it's like their pathology is just so bad that everything to them feels bad, and they just everything is negative and profound. And then like they're on the internet and everything's exaggerated and profound. Like, they're typing in all caps all the time. It looks like they're yelling at people from their computer screen, and like anyone that they don't agree with is suddenly the devil. Like, there's no, like, you and I got into it and like it surpassed and we're moving on. It's like those people then go on and like make it worse, and then keep going and keep going and keep going and turning it into harassment. And then like exaggerating it, and then like going into group chats and then turning it into organizing and like turning it into really unhealthy things. There's a lot of people in the MST community on that side of the spectrum. And then there's people like in the middle spectrum that are trying to figure out what's happening to them and what's going on. And they're trying to navigate this territory of the trauma they're dealing with, what's a trigger for them. They're dealing with self-awareness in their environment. What is a healthy way to relate to the environment? What are healthy behaviors and what are not? And it's like figuring out that template. And I also feel like there's people who are in that process who think that their template, their emotional template applies to everybody. So like if they're hyposexual and they're scared of sexuality and they become asexual or whatever, everybody has to be like that. Or and like because that's their emotional discovery pattern of them figuring out their PTSD and mastering it, and now they like project it as everybody. And then it's like that's not healthy. But then when someone disagrees, it turns into a fight. And then I feel like there's another spectrum of people that like go through therapy, work through their healing, and they're like, okay, like my fight or flight's getting triggered. Is this rational or not? Do I need to accept this? Do I need to understand it? Do I need to have tolerance for it? Where there's this level of self-awareness to do the checks and balances, to have cordial conversations about differences, to be able to open up hard and difficult conversations and have the capacity to have those hard conversations to create progress. What I feel happens a lot in the MST community specifically is that the MST community itself, because it's survivors who are impacted, you're going to have more people on the diminished capacity spectrum unless those people are in active treatment. And from my experience, treatment takes years. It's not 12 weeks. That shit takes years, like in-depth therapy for years. So it's, you know, if you're at the beginning of your spectrum, like the emotional spectrum, or like there's some people who don't ever go to therapy. So they're never going to understand that level of self-awareness to move to the other side. So when you're dealing with the MST community, you'll have a lot of that negative amplified pushback when things happen. Because if it doesn't rationalize with the template of the individual, all of a sudden it's bad, it's evil, and it's harmful when that's not the case, right? That's a trigger, and you're triggered because something in your template, but you might not have the social awareness to know whether or not A, if it's your template, whether or not it's harmful or not, right? 9 out of 10 times when you go through a trigger, you're like, I'm triggered, I'm safe, this is not harmful, there's no reason for me to respond like that. However, when you're not in therapy, you don't go through that process, that emotional process. So you don't know how to react like that. You're just like, ding, 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 bad. Fight or flight goes off. And then you're like, I'm going to just be like, let me type here on the internet because I'm fucking triggered as hell and I'm just going to write something, right? So I feel like that's what happens to a lot of people in the MST community because they don't have the level of treatment that they need. And then what ends up happening is it's like constant fights and blowouts and like stories that it's like telephone. Like you say one word at the beginning, and by the time you get to the end, it's a whole nother story. And that happens so much in our community, and it's like really unhealthy. And like not our organization, but like the MST community as a whole. Like there are people who generate things, and then like by the time it gets done, you're like, how the fuck do you even believe this shit? Like, that's really what happens sometimes. Like, it's pretty insane. Yeah, like, like, um, I have no desire to let people into my personal life, like, on a very personal basis. Like, there's a reason that I show certain things online and why I don't. And there's reasons why my social media has evolved over time, right? Like, the bigger my following has gotten, the less I share publicly. But it's like even at the limits on my sharing that I'm doing, it's like I have to even take it a step farther because it's like the interest in my life and just who I am and like the storytelling that people do and the constant gossip and conversation is like people want to turn it into like a reality show. And it's like I'm not getting paid to be doing this. Like I don't want to give up my privacy and my freedom for this, even if I got paid and I'm not getting paid to deal with this. So I'm going to make changes, right? Um, yeah, I think so. With this, I dealt with egocentricity, if you want to call it that. Having PTSD, like it definitely does that because PTSD is your defense systems with yourself. So if you're not taking medication and you're not in therapy, you'll definitely lean more towards your ego, right? Or if for some reason you have to come off a medication, there'll be points in time that you're going to lean more towards being egocentric. So if you think about majority of the community who has PTSD, who's not taking medication, and yes, marijuana helps, but like if you're not on SSRIs or you're not on medication to stabilize your serotonin for the long term, then yeah, you're going to deal with egocentricity on a regular basis. And that's also that causes constant conflict, right? Because you don't want to let things go and you want to just constantly fight because your ego wants that versus like, is this logical? Is this rational? Is what I'm doing okay? And I think that's part of the reason why things escalate the way they do and why things about my life escalate the way they do. It's like somebody's flight instinct turned on. All of a sudden, it's huge. They're not doing self-assessment. Now it's like attack, 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 attack. And I think that happens more often than not. Um, the mindful self-checking regulating is usually a goal. Yeah, I think emotional regulation is probably the most important thing you can do when you have PTSD for sure. Do I think a lot of our community does that? No, you can just tell by the reactions. Yeah, it's definitely impulsive and reactive, and you can see that by how people respond. Like you can tell when someone has a thought out reaction and when somebody is just impulsive. And I am not saying I'm not above doing either one of those. I have done all those. However, like when you're going through therapy and you're managing your PTSD, you'll think about things and you'll think about it before doing something impulsive. So, I've gone through my journeys and like, have I had my oops? Like I fucked up along the way plenty of times, not above fucking up either. However, like I learn and I move on and I get better. And like, that's all I think that we can do. When it gets to these points though, of like dealing with just everything as a whole, I'm doing the best that I can. And I can affirm that I am doing the best that I can. I know I'm doing the best that I can. I know that I'm giving my best and I'm making decisions from a good state of mind. But I need to continue doing that. And that's why I'm making the choices that I am for myself. Yeah, and I'm happy that you guys understand that, and I'm happy that you can appreciate that. So I'm gonna wrap it up for the night because it's after 10 p.m. and I'm sure everybody wants to go hang out and do their thing on the weekend. Be safe, make healthy choices, don't plot to harm people. If you're thinking about harming someone, you should probably call the VA crisis line. That's probably a really good idea. Other than that, enjoy your weekend.